Prhaze Galvan was born on February the 15th, 2006 in Michigan. She was described as happy, loving, bright and beautiful. She was a little girl with bright eyes. Her father was Joe Galvan and her stepmom was Jennifer. Jennifer herself was a licensed practical nurse. Her co-workers testified that Jennifer hated Prhaze. She referred to the child as the devil and claimed that the child was ruining her marriage. Jennifer was also accused of withholding meals from the child. She was also accused tying or restraining the child, all of which she denied. Joe, the father, had a history of mistreatment toward children. See, to many people, when they first met Prhaze, she was a normal, happy child. She was treated lovingly, just like the other children. But then, Joe had a son. His name was Joe Jr. That son passed away. This is when both Joe and Jennifer began to treat Prhaze differently. It was then that Jennifer decided she did not want to have her anymore. She couldn't stand to look at the child. She believed Prhaze was the devil. She blamed Prhaze for Joe Jr.'s death. Wow, that's disgusting. Now, on January the 15th, 2010, Jennifer arrived home from her night shift as a licensed practical nurse. She was home around 8 a.m. After doing a few household chores, she went into the master bedroom at 9 a.m. and found Joe in the bed. But while Joe was in the bed, Prhaze was standing with her nose against the wall. Jennifer then went to take a nap and she got up around 10:30 a.m. She then went to pick up her other daughter from kindergarten. Jennifer and her other daughter came back home around 12:30 p.m. They started to watch TV in the living room and then both of them fell asleep on the couch. Jennifer claimed that from seeing Prhaze against the wall to her falling asleep, that 2-hour period, she didn't see her again. After she got up after falling asleep watching TV, her and her daughter put their coats on to go and collect her other kids. Jennifer opened the door to her bedroom and told Joe that she was going and she's about to come back. At that moment, however, Jennifer knew Prhaze had wet herself and that Joe was going to make her take a shower. And as she was leaving, she could hear the shower running. But as she gets to her car, she heard a loud scream coming from Joe. She runs back inside. She finds Prhaze on the floor of the master bedroom. Joe then carried Prhaze into the bedroom and Prhaze puked onto Jennifer. Her vomit was all around her. Jennifer then performed CPR on Prhaze, because of course she was a licensed nurse, until the paramedics arrived around 3 p.m. Prhaze was rushed to hospital, but eventually she died. Now, the medical examiner, Daniel Spitz, he concluded that the death was a homicide and that the child suffered multiple blunt force head injuries. More specifically, the doctor concluded that she died of impact involving the right side of the head. This impact resulted in brain bleeding over the surface of the brain, and then the reaction of the brain to the bleeding, which is brain swelling. Dr. Spitz noted that she had injuries and marks all over her body in various stages of healing. There were pattern injuries, several of which were caused by a white spoon. The doctor estimated that there were 20 or more injuries to her head and neck. But when the police questioned their parents, they initially reported that Prhaze had slipped in the bathroom. However, the doctor and a pediatric both concluded that the bathtub injury doesn't fit the autopsy, and this type of injury could not account for the type of trauma the child experienced. Other evidence indicated that the injuries had been unrelenting and red marks that covered her body. There was also a on her lower back and blackened eyes. Other witnesses who had been with the child told police that her left or right eye would be black at different moments. Multiple family members told police they also observed Prhaze standing with her nose to the wall for at least 40 minutes. One family member testified Jennifer came to their home and asked for masking tape. After Jennifer left their home, they went and called Prhaze from the car. "Prhaze, how are you? How are you doing?" But Prhaze did not answer. They later went to the house and they saw Prhaze with her mouth, arms and knees taped together. This specific family member then made a report to the Child Protective Services because they did not see the treatment of the children improving. Taping your child together, masking your child together with tape, What the hell is wrong with you? You're a nurse, you moron. Now, to police, Jennifer said to them, oh, the black eye, that's nothing. There was this random occasion where she was in the bathroom and she slipped. Of course, she is lying out of her ass. Even a babysitter told police she noticed a tennis ball swelling out of the child's head, and there were marks everywhere on her arms, legs, thighs and back. When family members questioned Jennifer about the condition of the child, Jennifer claimed that the child was clumsy and received injuries from playing with the family puppy. Furthermore, there was also evidence that Prhaze was not being fed. You see, she weighed 32 pounds about a year before her death, but she was also 32 pounds at the time of her death. Now, of course, it does vary, but the average weight of a 4-year-old is between 28 to 44 pounds. 32 pounds is of course within that range, but it is a bit weird that the last time the child had been weighed, about a year before, to a year later, the child is the same. That's not normal, from my experience anyway. There were also family members who told police Prhaze would wake up in the middle of the night. She would search the home, even the garbage can, for food. And then because of this, Jennifer would deliberately withhold meals from the child as a form of discipline. They would also make her face the wall for about an hour. Many family members told police that the child was consistently disciplined for extended periods of time. It does make you wonder though, why does all this come out when the child has died? Where were you before? Police also discovered that Jennifer's biological children were not dressed or treated the same as Prhaze. Many people witnessed Prhaze transform from a happy child to a child who was withdrawn, non-interactive, not playful, and emotionless. Now, you're probably wondering, okay, but what actually happened to the child? How did the child pass away? Who did it? Well, that's where it gets a little bit tricky. See, there was suspicion that Jennifer encouraged the fatal injury. Both Joe and Jennifer claimed that Prhaze was injured when she was told to get in the shower after wetting her pants. What actually happened, according to police, is they figure out she wet herself, so they're going to put her in the shower, they're going to make it as cold as possible, and they're going to discipline her even more. But according to the judge, he did believe Joe was the one that inflicted the fatal injuries. But given Jennifer's history with her own children and her way of disciplining the child, the judge believed she was well aware of the pending torture that was to come. Specifically to this, Dr. Spitz testified the injury was probably within minutes to an hour, but could have occurred up to 8 hours earlier, and the Prhaze would have been symptomatic during this time. In other words, the parents would have clearly seen the child was in distress and they should have taken her to the hospital. When the first responders arrived at the house, they noted that her eyes were open, extremely dilated, and non-moving. Her color was monotone or gray, which is a sign of shock and a late sign in the body. And according to them, it takes a while to get to that point, and that it definitely indicated she was down for a while. The EMT who greeted the child at the ambulance did not believe she was alive at first because she was pale, limp, and not moving, and had dilated and non-reactive pupils. But also, her sclera was drying. The EMT indicated that the sclera is usually wet in a patient who just passed away, but will be dry in a patient who's been dead for hours or longer. Now, with all of this, as I mentioned, there was a problem. Police didn't exactly know what happened because neither parent confessed. All they had was reports from other family members about the torture the child experienced. But with this, Joe and Jennifer were charged with felony murder on the theory that they were either the principal or were the aider and abettor to the crime. So with all the injuries to the child and the previous reports to the DCF, there is reason to believe that one of the parents landed a fatal injury to the child, and that there had been a series of injuries leading up to Prhaze's death. Joe and Jennifer were both sentenced to life in prison. Now, one of the reasons why I've covered this case is due to its rarity, if you like. How many of you know about the life of Prhaze? I won't lie, the way the name is spelt, I'm not even saying it correctly. But this is a 4-year-old. I have a 4-year-old. Kids, with all their, driving us crazy as parents, right? Running around without a care in the world. They're very durable. So the level of injury or force it would take to do this to a child over and over again tells me that Joe and Jennifer torturing her was the only explanation. All for what? because they had a son that passed away. There's no information on that, but they had a son that passed away and they blamed the child. The child may have been, 2 or 3 at that time? Prhaze? How are you blaming her? The f*** is wrong with you? Some people, morons. And now, the true crime case of Hannah Williams. In the early hours of May the 12th, 2011, Corrie Williams telephoned her husband, Larry, as he drove home from work. Carrie told him that she had found their daughter, Hannah, lying face down in the backyard and unconscious. After instructing Carrie to call 911, Larry raced home and performed CPR until the medics arrived and transported Hannah to the hospital. Hannah was pronounced dead at 1:30 a.m. on May the 12th, 2011. A subsequent investigation revealed that Carrie and Larry routinely, physically and psychologically punished Hannah. They also punished Emmanuel, both of whom they had adopted from Ethiopia in 2008. Now, Dr. Daniel Seelove, the forensic pathologist who performed Hannah's autopsy, noticed that Hannah had visible injuries on her pelvis, elbows, knees, and calves. She had bruises on her knees, eyebrow, and upper pelvis, and multiple impact marks on her thighs and calves. He determined that when she died, Hannah suffered from severe malnutrition, with an abnormally thin body and protruding ribs and shoulder blades. Dr. Seelove identified Hannah's cause of death as hypothermia, with malnutrition and a bacterial infection in her stomach. Now, the Child Protective Services, or the CPS, they interviewed Emmanuel, they interviewed Larry and Carrie, and also their 7 biological children. The children revealed that Carrie and Larry had regularly abused Emmanuel and Hannah, causing scars. They had denied them food and forced them to eat sandwiches soaked in water. They were also forced to eat frozen, uncooked vegetables while sitting outside on the back porch away from the family. And they forced Hannah and Emmanuel to sleep in a locked closet or shower room. The Williams children described their parents' chosen methods of punishing Hannah physically and psychologically for what they called her disobedient behavior. One witness saw Carrie abuse Hannah with switches at least once every day in the last 6 months of her life. Hannah's elder brother Jacob testified that the intent of this corporal punishment was to inflict pain. Now, when Hannah first arrived from Ethiopia, she slept in a bedroom with her sisters. When Carrie and Larry caught Hannah stealing food, they forced her to sleep outside in a barn. For a 2-week period in the fall of 2010, they locked Hannah in a shower room at night without access to a toilet. Now, Carrie and Larry used a plastic plumbing tube and glue stick. This is what they referred to as switches. Hannah was also stuffed in a small closet at times. Now, this closet measured 2 feet by 4 feet. Hannah was 5 feet tall, and she had no ability to turn on the light while inside because the switch was on the outside of this closet. Moreover, Carrie forced Hannah to stay in the closet all day if she refused to follow Carrie's instructions to go outside. Now, one of Carrie's younger sons testified that Hannah was locked in the closet for up to 24 hours at a time. When Carrie locked Hannah inside the closet during the daytime, she played an audiobook of the Bible because Carrie was trying to get Hannah's brain to think differently. If you want your child to be more religious, you don't force it into them, you moron. Larry and Carrie also made Hannah use an outhouse behind the barn and wash her hands and shower outside in the backyard, and would not permit her to use any of the 3 indoor bathrooms in the home. Carrie began imposing this punishment in the summer of 2010 because Hannah suffered from a blood-borne disease. Carrie regularly escorted Hannah to and from the backyard outhouse, which Hannah was the only child forced to use. Emmanuel was unsure why Larry and Carrie would hose Hannah off in the backyard with cold water, but he could see that she wasn't comfortable when being hosed down. Carrie also decided at one point to cut off all of Hannah's hair in punishment for having cut the grass too short. You cut the grass, so I'm going to cut your hair? What? The Williamses, Carrie and Larry, also used food deprivation as a form of punishment. They forced Hannah and Emmanuel to miss meals, with Hannah sometimes being denied any food for 2 consecutive days. When they did provide food to eat, they required Hannah and Emmanuel to eat separately from the rest of the family. The parents forced both Hannah and Emmanuel to eat on the floor, in another room, or outside, when the rest of the family ate at the dining table. Carrie often required Hannah to eat her meals in the locked closet. In the last few months of Hannah's life, Carrie and Larry forced both Hannah and Emmanuel to eat their meals outside for what Carrie described as mealtime oppositionality. What the fuck does that mean? Moreover, when Hannah and Emmanuel received meals, they were not fed the same food as the other children. Instead, the lunch sandwiches that Hannah and Emmanuel received had been soaked in water by either Larry, Carrie, or one of the other children. Carrie testified that the children were fed these wet sandwiches because Hannah and Emmanuel refused to cooperate at the meal table. That doesn't mean you go and wet their sandwiches, you wet wipe. Dinner time was no different. Carrie usually served Hannah and Emmanuel cold leftovers topped with undefrosted frozen vegetables. You see, Hannah went from a weight of 108 pounds and a BMI of 23. This was back in 2009. She went from that to 78 pounds and a BMI of less than 16, which signified severe malnutrition. Carrie's physical punishment followed Hannah to the backyard. Carrie forced Hannah to engage in punishments she and the children called walking the line and boot camp. You see, walking the line involved forcing Hannah to walk the perimeter of an outdoor pickleball court in the backyard. Boot camp itself involved extra chores, usually outdoors, and sometimes involved stacking and restacking the same pile of rocks. Hannah underwent boot camp at least once or twice a week in the last 6 months of her life. Now, regarding the incident of her death on May 11th, 2011, it began as a typical day for the Williamses. While the children emerged from their bedrooms, Carrie let Hannah out of the locked closet. Then Larry, with the other children's assistance, prepared breakfast around 10 a.m. Given that Larry admitted that Hannah ate breakfast outside, she likely ate her breakfast outside that morning. After breakfast, the children cleaned up the kitchen, did their chores, and went outside to play. The children recall playing Capture the Flag that morning. Hannah, who was wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants, was outside but did not participate. Larry left for work around noon. The children typically ate lunch between 2 or 3 p.m. Carrie escorted Hannah to the outhouse before lunch. She then gave Hannah her lunch, again probably a wet sandwich, around 3 p.m. Although Carrie initially denied forcing Hannah to remain outside as punishment that day, she admitted she forced Hannah to eat outside for disobedience being oppositional. And one of Carrie's sons confirmed that Hannah was required to stay outside all day as punishment. There was also testimony that Carrie refused to let Hannah remain indoors when she was menstruating. Carrie testified that around 4 p.m. she told Hannah to come back inside, presumably to do her schoolwork, but that Hannah would not comply. Carrie saw Hannah remove her shoes and stand at the back door. Carrie shut the door on Hannah. Carrie testified that initially she checked on Hannah every 5 to 10 minutes after Hannah refused to come inside after lunch. She saw Hannah put her shoes back on, but had no recollection of what Hannah did between 4:30 and 6 p.m. when Carrie again walked Hannah to the outhouse. Carrie claimed she again told Hannah to come inside and Hannah again refused. By that time, it had started to drizzle outside. Carrie escorted Hannah to the outhouse a third time around 8:30 p.m. But this time, Carrie saw Hannah throw herself on the ground. She testified that Hannah took a few steps and lunged forward, landing on her hands and knees. She further testified that Hannah did this repeatedly before and after using the outhouse. At that point, Carrie chose to leave Hannah outside because she couldn't watch it anymore. After Carrie returned inside, she saw Hannah continue to throw herself around for another 20 to 30 minutes. One of Carrie's sons testified that he observed Hannah's odd behavior as well. Carrie noticed by this time that Hannah had skinned her elbows and knees and had a knot on her forehead. Carrie claims she sent her oldest son Joshua outside to bring Hannah inside. Hannah began exercising as Joshua instructed, but when she stopped, Carrie sent her next eldest son Jacob to do the same thing. Jacob testified that he abused Hannah and ordered her to do sit squats. Again, Hannah complied for about a minute and then stopped. Finally, Carrie sent her third eldest son outside to repeat the abuse. Carrie admitted that she wanted Hannah to do exercises to keep warm. Dr. Seeler testified that when he conducted Hannah's autopsy, he observed marks on Hannah's left thigh, where she had been struck by a long, narrow object, such as a strap or switch, at least 4 times, with sufficient force to cause her blood vessels to burst. He found 10 similar pattern bruises on Hannah's lower calves. Carrie claimed that she then took Hannah her dinner outside. Carrie said Hannah did not eat the food. Hannah brought the fork to her mouth as if she was going to take a bite and then put the fork back. In a written statement to police, one of Carrie's sons said that Hannah was leaning over the table and was unable to eat. After 5 minutes, Carrie took Hannah's dinner plate away and moved it into the house. Carrie said at some point she attempted to carry Hannah inside, but Hannah went limp. She then ordered Jacob and Joshua to carry Hannah inside. Carrie told the boys to first don latex gloves and to remove Hannah's shoes and socks because they were soggy from dripping water and Hannah's blood. Carrie said Hannah was so bloody and her clothes so wet from walking in the rain that the water dripping down had made the blood drip down all over her soft, scented shoes, and she wanted them removed before Hannah came inside. Joshua complied, removing Hannah's shoes and socks and throwing them in the garbage. Now Jacob testified that when Joshua returned to the back porch, Hannah started taking off her clothes. Carrie went outside and saw Hannah sitting buck naked from the waist down. Carrie told her sons to go back inside and to forget it because modesty is important in our family. Modesty over nutrition, eh? Carrie took a set of dry clothes to Hannah, told her to get out of her wet clothes, returned back inside, and turned the patio light off, leaving Hannah in the dark. Carrie testified that she checked on Hannah twice, turning on and off the patio light each time. At some point, she thought Hannah had begun changing her clothes, but Carrie was busy with her other children, so she instructed one of them to check on Hannah. This child testified that she checked on Hannah every 15 minutes and saw that Hannah continued to remove more clothing until she was naked. Like Carrie, her child turned on and off the light every time she checked on Hannah. Hannah apparently remained outside in the dark, bloody, wet, cold, and naked for at least 2 hours. Now around midnight, Larry called Carrie to let her know that his van pool had dropped him off at the park and ride and that he was on the way home. When Carrie told Larry about her perception of Hannah's behavior, Jacob overheard them arguing about whether Hannah was really falling down on purpose. Larry was not at all surprised by Carrie's description of Hannah's behavior. The kids next saw Hannah face down on the back patio. They told Carrie, who went outside, to find Hannah with her face halfway on the concrete and half on the glass, and her mouth full of dirt from having her face fall onto a molehill just off the patio. Hannah was cold to her touch. Carrie rolled her over and could see that it wasn't good. She ran inside to grab a sheet from the linen closet to cover Hannah, and then tried to carry her inside. When Carrie realized they could not carry Hannah, Carrie enlisted Joshua's help. Joshua came outside and carried Hannah inside. Once Hannah was inside, neither Carrie nor Joshua could find a pulse. This is when they called 911, and the operator directed Carrie to perform CPR. When Larry arrived, thereafter, He and Carrie took turns to administer CPR until the medics arrived. Now, when Skagit County Sheriff Deputy Chad Clark arrived, he saw a large lump on Hannah's forehead. Pictures taken of Hannah's body showed her contusions, abrasions, and dirt above her eye and in her nostrils. Hannah was transported to the Valley Hospital where Dr. Jeanette Tomlinson pronounced her dead at 1:30 a.m. on May the 12th, 2011. Now, Dr. Tomlinson did a full examination of Hannah's body and also saw contusions on her forehead, bruises and abrasions on her hips, knees and shins, and red streaks on her thighs. Carrie told Dr. Tomlinson that Hannah had been face planting outside that night. She found this version of events odd, given that it would be inconsistent with the normal human reflexive response to a fall. The state's experts testified that Hannah's behavior before can be explained by the fact that she was so severely malnourished. Dr. Weister testified that starvation causes distress and anxiety in a child, leading the child to steal food, to exhibit abnormal behaviors around food, and to engage in defiant behaviors in general. And in all of this, you keep asking yourself, why treat the child this way? Who knows? Now, Dr. Francis Chalmers, a pediatric medical consultant for the state, testified that when a body lacks adequate fuel in the form of calories, it starts using body tissue as energy. This can result in behavioral changes, fatigue, and serious cardiac arrhythmia. Both Dr. Chalmers and Dr. Weister testified that a child as emaciated as Hannah would be more susceptible to hypothermia because she would have insufficient insulating fat under the skin to keep the body warm in a cool environment. And Dr. Weister noted that people suffering from hypothermia exhibit erratic physical movements, such as stumbling or having difficulty walking, and irrational behavior from an altered mental status. Dr. Seelove noted hypothermia victims often have a false sensation that they are warm and engage in paradoxical undressing, which would explain her behavior on the patio, meaning they remove their clothing even though one would expect them not to be in that situation. An individual suffering from severe hypothermia will lapse into a coma. In fact, it was revealed that Carrie complained to her knitting club friends that if Hannah would not eat what was put in front of her, then she would not eat at all. Carrie denied Hannah food or made the food unpalatable to eat and forced her to eat in away from the rest of the family. She testified Hannah began stealing food about a year before her death, and Carrie said Hannah lied about stealing when confronted. Well then, stop starving her, you muppet. Carrie told friends that Hannah was a liar who rifled through everyone's belongings and stole from them. Carrie locked Hannah in the shower room and then the closet to keep her from hoarding or gorging on sweets. When one of her friends suggested she return Hannah to the adoption agency, her response was, "I don't wish her on anyone." Wow. During the trial, Larry Williams himself turned on his wife and blamed her for the child's death. Larry said through his attorney that his wife should spend decades in jail because she was the primary actor. In fact, a foster mother who adopted Emmanuel after all this abuse testified during the trial. This new foster mother, she said Emmanuel was really thin and covered in scratches when she took him in. According to the foster mother, the child was so emaciated that his ribs were showing through his skin. After the arrests, Emmanuel and the other biological children were placed in foster care or with relatives. So, to conclude on this story, Carrie was sentenced to the maximum of nearly 37 years in the death of Hannah. Larry was given an exceptional sentence of nearly 28 years. And the question you gotta ask is, all for what? For what? Why? Why? Look at how many children you got. You're an experienced parent. If the child pisses you off, it's okay. That's what they do. Starve them, abuse them, lock them in a closet, throw them outside. What the hell? 37 years, not enough. 28 years, I've slept longer than 28 years. Anyway, comment, tell me what you think. And finally, this is the case of Ray John Daniels. In October 2006, police responded to a 911 call at the home of 23-year-old Prhaze Moses. Her 8-year-old son, Rajon Daniels, was unresponsive. He had vomit around his mouth, a rope. He also had chemical burns, along with many sores and other injuries to his bruised body. Rayon had been pulled out of school, and Prhaze was supposedly homeschooling him in what she called Prhaze's home school, a name she registered with the state. The public school he previously had been to had been told by her to not give him any food due to a special diet he was on. The school became suspicious and asked more questions about this mystery diet, and it's at that point she took him out of the school. Prhaze eventually was arrested on suspicion of murder, torture, and child endangerment. Police, during the investigation, said that it was possibly for a year Prhaze had kept the child in his dark room and tortured him. Prhaze had been punishing her son for things like wetting his bed by pouring harsh chemicals on his body, tying him up, and starving him on a diet. On the day he died, the child was made to drink a household cleaner, and his body finally gave up. Rajon had multiple bruises, numerous belt welts, and other injuries in various stages of healing. At the hospital, he lay on the bed. His neck was in a brace with a tube coming out of his mouth. He looked unrecognizable, and in fact, social workers at Contra Costa's Children and Family Services had been called at least 3 times with complaints about the treatment of Rajon since May of 2005. After each investigation, Rajon was bizarrely sent home to live with his mother. Eventually, Rajon died at the hospital, and the autopsy report did not produce any cause of death at the beginning, but that's because the toxicology tests needed to be finished. However, police said that it was obvious that Prhaze had been the one to cause his death. Detective Eric Smith said it appears he was held hostage in the home to prevent his escape. This kid was treated worse than a dog. Police had found the sheets in his room had been duct taped to the bed. The window was kept locked at all times. The door had a padlock on the outside. And inside the room, the only other piece of furniture was a small table. And on the table was a video camera and a baby monitor. You see, Prhaze had been continuously watching Rajon on video while he spent most of this time locked inside a room. He spent most of his day in that room every day. He rarely went outside, and when he was heavily supervised by his mother. And since he was not allowed to use the bathroom anytime he wanted, he would often wet and soil his pants, and Prhaze thought that he was doing this on purpose. She said that whenever she would get back from work, he would defecate on himself. She thought that he was doing mind games with her. But obviously he did it because he was scared. See, whenever she came home, she would end up torturing him. Lieutenant Enos Johnson, at the crime scene, he said that when he entered the apartment, it literally burned his eyes. He was met with fumes, very strong fumes, throughout the apartment. It was horrifying to think that a child lived in that environment, and that a child had to sleep in that environment with open containers of household cleaner. Prhaze herself admitted to police that she had poured chemicals on his genitals in an attempt to stop him from wetting the bed. What the fuck? And the mystery of all of this is that Prhaze also had a 3-year-old daughter who was not abused at all. And that child was being taken by a friend as the police arrived, but was later placed in protective custody. Rajon himself was around 8 years old. Eventually, this 3-year-old, Prhaze lost her rights to that child. Police found vomit in the bathroom and Rajon's bedroom, along with empty cleaning solution containers. In the kitchen, police found a pile of brown slop in a blender as well as in a cup. Prhaze told them that it was beans and spaghetti, saying that Rajon was unable to eat solid food because it always made him vomit. On the day in question, Prhaze said she had fed Rajan around 5 p.m., then locked him in the room. She was watching him via the video and she noticed he was sitting up. Then she went to check on him and he was frothing at the mouth and would not respond to her. Now in April of 2005, Prhaze sent letters to King Elementary School with complaints that her son had been eating food from their cafeteria. She let them know that Rajan was on a special diet and asked them to stop feeding him. At this point, the school district contacted Child Services with complaints about Rajan's behavior and the fact that his mother was withholding food. A social worker did a phone investigation and decided no action needed to be taken. In July of 2005, a woman at a fast food restaurant called the police, saying that a child has been playing on the slides without adult supervision continuously for over 2 hours. Police came to investigate and Rajan told them that he had run away from home because his mother was putting handcuffs on him. The officer said he did not see any bruises or injuries on Rajan and that he had said his mother was not abusing him. A report was written and a social worker did another phone investigation. Again, no action was taken. On November the 23rd, 2005, Rajan ran away from home again by jumping out of his bedroom window on the second floor. Prhaze reported him missing around 10 a.m. that day. When he was found, another phone interview was conducted and again, no action was taken. So, on October the 27th, 2006, Rajan died of trauma from long-term child abuse. Prhaze is arrested and Rajan's 3-year-old sister is put into foster care. The coroner's office concluded that he died due to trauma because of battered child syndrome. The autopsy report said that he suffered from ketoacidosis, which is dangerously high levels of acids that build up in the blood and can lead to diabetic coma or death. Although diabetes is a possible cause, the report suggested that for Rajan, starvation was a more likely culprit. Now, in a trial, in March of 2007, Prhaze pled not guilty to murder. But then in April of 2009, Prhaze changed her plea to not guilty by reason of insanity. In November of the same year, Judge Charles Birch agreed that Prhaze was legally insane. And in January of 2010, she was sentenced to 25 years to life in a state mental hospital. However, in 2012, almost 3 years after she had been sentenced, Prhaze petitioned the court for an early release. And in February of that year, a judge ordered that Prhaze would be released into a conditional release program because doctors said that she was no longer a danger to anyone. In March of 2013, Prhaze was 30 years old when she was released from the hospital and would be required to enter an ongoing treatment program which would be monitored by the state. A friend went to visit Prhaze at the hospital and said that Prhaze seemed shocked to learn that her son was dead and told the friend that she learned how to be a parent by watching the ants while she was growing up. That's a bit weird. The friend in this moment thought she meant aunts, as in auntie, but no. She literally meant insects. It was said that she was having paranoid delusions and the doctors claim that her condition was a mental illness that could be fleeting. Of course, objections had been raised by the district attorney's office about the release of Prhaze, but a trial was never asked for. Doctors at the hospital had said that Prhaze had been the model patient, saying that she had shown how it was possible for the mentally ill to be given a second chance if they received the right treatment along with support. What can you say? If she's gone through the system and they're saying yes, she's insane, and then they have her released, you just have to take it on face value because you know and I know that 99.999% of those that claim insanity get told, no, you're not insane, get your ass in jail. So I believe she was actually insane. Should she have been released? I don't know. Comment, tell me what you think.